He's not even worried about, hey, there were multiple rounds of gunfire. I am bleeding. Is everybody else okay? No. I don't know what kind of personality disorder that is, but I'm fucking scared of that. Hey y'all, how are you doing? I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. It's me, Kim, and I am back for another video. We are here today to talk about the apparent assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee for president in the United States, and how the Republican Party is going to use that to frame Donald Trump as the strong, masculine leader that God wanted the Republican Party to have at this moment in time. Let's start with the video.
You see something that said, take a look at what happened. Oh.
Move to spare. Hold. When you're ready. On you.
Ready?
Move.
Up.
Move. Go.
Hawkeye's here.
Hawkeye's here. Move it to spare.
Spare, get ready. Spare, get ready.
You ready?
Shooters down. Shooters down.
Are we good? Shooters down. Are we good to move?
Shooters down. We're good to move.
Clear.
We're
Let's
clear.
move. Let's move.
We're clear.
Come on.
Let me get my shoes.
I got you, sir.
Let me get my shoes, sir.
Hold that in your head, it's bloody.
So we gotta move to the bus. Let me get my shoes.
Watch out.
Wait.
So that was that. On July 13th at around 6:15 p.m., 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks used a semi-automatic rifle, an AR-15, to open fire at a Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. I haven't been able to find a definitive count of how many people were at the rally, but it was thousands. I know in Florida the week before, they were saying tens of thousands, 30 or 40,000. So maybe right around that number. Crooks allegedly fired 8 shots. A bullet grazed Donald Trump's ear. He was, as you saw, hurried off stage by a gang of Secret Service agents. One man was shot in the head and killed instantly, and 2 others were critically injured. I have to say that Donald Trump is a louse. It's just the scum of the earth, truly the dregs of society. But I don't find anything worth celebrating there because the consequences are going to be so far-reaching. But beyond that, I see too few people talking about how, though we are in the middle of a super expensive, very long, very boring presidential campaign, but partisan politics is just like the cherry on top of that kind of violence. If you live in the United States, you are subject to that kind of violence in all kinds of situations, in all kinds of forums. You got to be worried about it at the mall, if you go to a concert, if you go to a festival, at school, if you go to college, if you go to a parade, you're vulnerable to that everywhere. There is this thing of like, oh, God don't like ugly. Did the Uvalde kids? I mean, I'm just saying, like, this is way, way bigger and deeper in the US than Republican Party MAGA Trumpers. And I do wonder why there's just not a lot of talk about that. One, because law enforcement has not found a manifesto from Thomas Crooks. Apparently, he registered as a Republican in September of last year, but we don't know what his explicit aims are or if they were political. There were reports that he had explosives in his car. But like, there are way too many question marks for people to so confidently draw such definitive conclusions about politics or whatever. What else do we know about Thomas Crooks? He graduated from high school in 2020, and a former classmate was interviewed telling news media that he was a loner and that he was bullied. Honestly, reporters, I am not on the new Democratic Party's we hate the media train. We're going to talk about that. The way that reporters ask questions in these situations, we've got to establish some new norms because it's not doing what you think it's doing. But anyways, so back to what that young man was talking about. He apparently knew Thomas Crooks when he was in high school. Thomas Crooks was a loner. He was bullied. We have a crisis, an epidemic of lonely, mentally ill. Yes, I am going to say it because I do think that if you fire on a group of people or at a presidential candidate, that there is something wrong. Young men who have access to very powerful weapons and they keep killing people. Are we going to get to the point where we address the lonely, deranged young men, often white, who get access to very powerful weaponry and keep killing people? Like, okay. Yeah, let's turn down the volume and moderate the tone of our political discourse. But also, there's this whole other thing that's happening. There's this whole other thing. But we also have to address the Trump part. That is why I'm here. Look, there's no way else to say it. Donald Trump is extraordinarily lucky. He is a horrible human being, but he is lucky in a way that would make you embrace Nietzsche, okay? Look, if after you see that, you don't dabble into nihilism, something's wrong, because this is crazy.
We see something that said, take a look at what happened. We see something that said, take a look at what happened. Said, take a look what happened.
That is insane. And I see the conspiracy theorists. I see that this is a false flag and this is staged and there's no way. And I feel ya. I really do feel you. It's hard for me to believe that even Donald Trump, the stunt queen that he is, would sign up to have a bullet be shot so close to his brain. Oh, it's so crazy that the bullet accidentally grazed his ear and then other bullets literally went directly through somebody else's head. Donald Trump is not brave like that. He is diabolical, but he is a coward. I just don't believe it. That whole scene showed that while Trump is a despicable human, he is a great entertainer. In the midst of utter chaos, you hear the bullets, you hear the blood-curdling screams, and he went around his humanity and straight into performance mode. P.T. Barnum who? I cannot get over the screams, the gunshots, the ducking. He gets back up and he's talking about, where are my shoes? And the thing is, he's not even worried about, hey, there were multiple rounds of gunfire. I am bleeding. Is everybody else okay? No. Fist in the air. That is so fucking sick. I don't know what kind of personality disorder that is, but I'm fucking scared of that. To have the presence of mind to pose and yell out fight, oh, we're fucked. It is simultaneously astonishing and terrifying. Because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I actually do believe that Donald Trump, who has been an unrepentant stunt queen, a man who has shamelessly, for the last 50 years, sought out every single opportunity to get into the press or paint himself in a heroic or impressive light, that after all of that practice, like, that was his Super Bowl, like that was his Olympic gold medal race. And so after all of that training, him having the presence of mind to say, where are the photographers? Let me get the shot. But, he's fine. Thank goodness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But certainly there are some real legitimate questions to be asked about the security.
And watch and listen to the rally, right? We couldn't see him, but we could hear him. So we walked up, and probably 5 to 7 minutes of Trump speaking. I'm estimating here. I have no idea, But we noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle.
A rifle.
We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him.
This is a diagram from CBS News about the distance between the shooter and the stage where Trump was standing. Because I have horrible spatial awareness and people are describing things in terms of yards, girl, I don't know what a yard is. I had my boyfriend the other day point out to me, so how far away would that be? And he pointed it out to me, and I was so blown away. How did that happen? Truly. What are the Secret Service people doing? What is law enforcement doing? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I totally understand if you are, because it doesn't make sense at all. The real question for us now moving forward, people who value democracy and freedom and civil rights and access to reproductive health care and a social safety net and government services and federal agencies that improve the lives of millions of Americans. If you care about any of those things, you are deeply invested in what Donald Trump is going to do next and if it'll be effective. And I've spent some time thinking about this. So the question is, how are they going to use that series of moments, the Republicans and Donald Trump, how are they going to use that to double down on their rhetoric and pursue their political goals? I think that this has put Donald Trump in a frighteningly good position. I don't want to say all is lost. All hope is never lost, but I do believe really deeply that if there's going to be even a shot, that the Democratic Party and Joe Biden are going to have to play a perfect game. Things are aligned so perfectly right now for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. If Democrats and Joe Biden, because I don't think he's moving off the ticket at this point, if they are not on their A game every single day for the next, 118 days until November 4th, it's not great. I say that in large part because, though I know most people don't believe polls, Joe Biden and Donald Trump do believe polls. Last Thursday, Jen O'Malley Dillon, Biden's campaign chairman, sent out a memo that was leaked to the press that indicated that they understand that right now Joe Biden is losing to Donald Trump. Now, this was before July 13th. In that memo, she states that based on the Biden campaign's own internal polling data, that they see in their data, their polls, that undecided voters, especially men, were moving toward Trump after June 27th, and Democratic-leaning voters were becoming undecided voters. As a reminder, this election will come down to thousands of votes in about 5 states. While the national polling averages matter, which is, I know people check 538 or Real Clear Polling or the Cook Political Report and they see 44 to 39 or whatever. But we live in a country where the president of the United States is dictated by the winner of the Electoral College. So you have to win enough states to get to 270 electoral votes. And you have to look at the swing state polls. And in those polls, Biden is polling worse than many Democratic senators and House members. Because, as I said before, Democrats are popular. Democratic policies, relatively popular, do pretty well. They're way more popular than Joe Biden. And that is the problem. Not only did Donald Trump have a lead in most of the polls, okay? And certainly he had a lead in the most significant states, the states that the pollsters and the campaign people have decided will eventually decide this election. But he has now the opportunity to take advantage of some of the narratives that have dominated this campaign cycle. And this allows the Trumpers to project their ideals onto him and allow Donald Trump to be a vessel for whatever they want him to represent. So now we're at a place where Donald Trump can be the perfect vehicle for the perpetuation of regular conservative ideals like deregulation and low taxes. He gets to be the embodiment of the perfect purveyor of Christian nationalism, right? A masculine, aggressive Christian nationalism. And even for the secular people, he gets to embody this kind of resilient masculinity, right? Now, because of this near-death experience, people get to map whatever they want onto Donald Trump in a way that puts him on a pedestal. Now, if you're the president of the United States, you're always going to be, exalted or revered or respected or whatever. But this is something else. You had a bullet or multiple bullets fly past your head and you're still fucking alive. Years ago, Bill Clinton said strong and wrong beats weak and right. And I think we should expect Bill Clinton to be right. Donald Trump is in a great position to radiate strength. Here's data from the Pew Research Center. Again, I know nobody believes polls. Nobody believes polls anymore. Nobody believes expertise. Nobody believes data. It's okay. We're all just trying to cope with the situation that we're in. The Pew Research Center have done a lot of work around assessing how people feel about the relative mental and physical fitness of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Polls have consistently shown that registered voters express more doubts about Biden's mental and physical fitness to be president. Clearly, neither of them is doing great. But the perception is that Joe Biden is much weaker mentally and physically. We know Donald Trump is lazy. He's unattractive. He was even unattractive when he was young, okay? At least Joe Biden used to be cute. He's unathletic, but this is an opportunity for him to be able to show the world his toughness. In the past, Donald Trump has used money and access to beautiful women and aggression and bravado to telegraph masculinity and manliness. Now, after this near-death experience, basically for the first time ever, because we know he's a coward, he gets to telegraph, radiate, show, demonstrate resilience and leadership. Trump is the man who very famously got 5 deferments for the Vietnam draft, for bone spurs and, all kinds of stuff. And now he gets to embody this image of the courageous general, the battle-tested general, somebody who has been closer to death than most people. Let's look at some of the messages that he posted on Truth Social. I want to thank the United States Secret Service and all of law enforcement for their rapid response on the shooting that just took place in Butler, Pennsylvania. Most importantly, I want to extend my condolences to the family of the person at the rally who was killed, and also to the family of another person that was badly injured. It is incredible that such an act can take place in our country. Nothing is known at this time, and the shooter, who is now dead, I was shot with a bullet that pierced the upper part of my right ear. I knew immediately that something was wrong, and that I heard a whizzing sound, shots, and immediately felt the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening. God bless America. Let's go to the next one. Based on yesterday's terrible events, I was going to delay my trip to Wisconsin in the Republican National Convention by 2 days, but I've just decided that I cannot allow a shooter or potential assassin to force change to scheduling or anything else. Therefore, I will be leaving for Milwaukee as scheduled at 3:30 p.m. today. Thank you, DJT. Oh, Donald Trump's so brave to get on a private jet to fly to the Republican National Convention that is completely curated, scheduled, built up around you and in protecting you. Okay, what's crazy is people really fell for that shit. It's no surprise what Elon Musk's political leanings are, but it was really interesting that immediately after the shooting, he basically was like, I am now full-throatedly endorsing and supporting Donald Trump. And then we have the billionaire who has been mad ever since his wife got outed as a plagiarist, Bill Ackman, coming out. My friends ask me why I am publicly supporting Donald Trump, but it's my responsibility. They're coming out of the closet to support Donald Trump. This is not a brave or courageous act, but you get to attach bravery and courage to a very banal act, a very expected act, especially if you're a billionaire. You get to attach these high-level values to it because of Donald Trump just experiencing this kind of harrowing thing and then projecting afterwards strength and resilience and power. But I want to reiterate that this is not about actual strength. This is about the performance of strength and masculinity. Another thing that I found to be very strange, very odd, are the number of people, men in particular, men and Candace Owens, people who sit in their homes and make videos all day talking shit about the women in the Secret Service. I would never even think to talk shit about the women who are actually responsible for throwing their bodies over people to use them as shield and take bullets. But again, the discourse around the Secret Service agents is reflective of the kind of values and ideals that the Trumpers support, right? Their vision for what America should be. Beyond the show of strength, the apparent assassination attempt also gives Donald Trump to rally the Christian nationalists. And let's get a little primer on what Christian nationalism is.
Christian nationalism is an ideology that seeks to idealize and advocate for a fusion of American civic life with a very particular kind of Christianity. And when we say Christianity, we don't really mean people who love Jesus, who have tried to live Christ-like lives. We mean Christianity is code word for people like us who are conservative, natural-born citizens who think like us, who look like us. And so Christian nationalism is really this ideology that seeks to fuse and institutionalize that kind of Christianity with American policy and symbols and founding myths and our kind of deep story. We find in all of our studies that where we're looking at these things with national survey data, we find that when white Americans hear the language of Christian nationalism, when they hear that about Christian heritage and Christian values, they tend to think with nostalgia for a time where people like us, the right kind of people, had cultural and political influence. So we call white Christian nationalism this ideology that seeks to take back America for all, lack of a better phrasing, white, ethnically white, racially white, traditional conservative Americans. We find in survey after survey that the kinds of beliefs that Marjorie Taylor Greene affirms, that we would be proud Christian nationalists, that the Republican Party ought to be the party of Christian nationalism. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene may seem fringe in the fact that she is so outspoken and so blatant about this, but this is actually a very common ideology that Americans believe that America was founded on biblical principles, that Christianity made us prosperous as a nation, that we ought to not only celebrate that path, but we ought to return to it. We ought to institutionalize Christianity as our national identity. We ought to make policy in light of it. And we ought to really privilege Christianity in the public square above other religions. And we don't have to give equal time. We don't even have to recognize other religions as much as we do Christianity.
Not all Christians who want to see their values enacted through our government are Christian nationalists or are promoting violence. Many, like all Americans, would like to see their values kind of find expression in the country in which they live. But in more extreme versions of Christian nationalism, we do see a correlation between the idea that America has a special destiny, and it's a destiny that's under threat and that must be protected. We see connections between that and a willingness to use violence to restore kind of the rightful order, to restore the rightful dominion over this country so that it can follow God's path and secure God's blessings.
Christian nationalists are overwhelmingly comprised of white evangelicals in the United States, and white evangelicals love Donald Trump. This is from Gallup. The AP VoteCast survey shows that 81% of white evangelical Protestant voters went for Trump this year. This year would be 2020, compared with 18% who voted for Biden. The Edison exit polls estimate that 76% of white evangelicals voted for Trump, 24% for Biden. So between 3/4 and 4/5. But wait, there's more.
This video goes out as a call to action for our country and for our nation. This video also goes out as a battle cry to the patriots of this country to repeat the very words that President Trump spoke after taking a literal bullet to the face for freedom. And that's to fight, fight, fight. To the Christians that just want to remain neutral. Are you awake yet? Are you paying attention yet? We're in a battle against good versus evil. Now, is Donald Trump perfect? Absolutely not. But the evil of the other administration, the evil that is plaguing this nation, the obvious attempts to take out the person that would do the best job to fight against it. Those of you who are still on the fence, it's time to wake up. What side are you on? I'm on the side of the outlaw that just took a bullet for America. And I am a Christian that is speaking out boldly that I'm voting for Donald Trump. Remember the 5th of November. It is time to wake up, patriots, and it is time to wake up, Christians. Wake up.
Okay, that scary because guns are all over the United States. All kinds of people have them, but those people really have guns and stuff. But there's precedent for that. There are many antecedents to that.
You can call us extremists. You can call us domestic terrorists. You know who else was called a lot of names his whole life? Jesus.
I'm a Christian and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists.
The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church.
So much for this myth of separation of church and state.
When you look at our platform,
It's the only platform out there that recognizes the creator, that recognizes that we have rights that supersede government.
We need people all over the country to be willing to put on that full armor of God, to stand firm against the left's schemes. You'll be met with flaming arrows, but the shield of faith will stop that.
What is so crazy and truly strikes me as quite sacrilegious is the way that those people compare overtly or tacitly or implicitly, they compare Donald Trump to Jesus Christ. You know, Christ and the crucifixion are, as somebody who grew up evangelical Christian, you know, I used to go to church 3 or 4 times a week. Christ and the crucifixion are central components of the ideology. They are central components of the faith. And somebody has been briefing Donald Trump. He's come a long way since he was talking about 2 Corinthians, because he is explicitly trying to help them draw that connection. Here is something that he posted on Truth Social. Thank you to everyone for your thoughts and prayers yesterday, as it was God alone who prevented the unthinkable from happening. We will fear not, but instead remain resilient in our faith and defiant in the face of wickedness. Our love goes out to the other victims and their families. We pray for the recovery of those who are wounded and hold in our hearts the memory of the citizen who was so horribly killed in this moment. It is more important than ever that we stand united and show our true character as Americans, remaining strong and determined and not allowing evil to win. I truly love our country and love you all, and look forward to speaking to our great nation this week from Wisconsin. DJT. When Trump says fear not, he is making an explicit allusion to Jesus in the Bible. Jesus says some version of fear not or don't be afraid several times to his disciple in the face of danger and in the face of his own death. Evangelicals, when they talk about the cross, they're often talking about the idea that the cross represents the sacrifice that Jesus was willing to make so that Jesus' disciples and every Christian from then to eternity, that they would be able to live forever and flourish. In their eyes, Donald Trump's willingness to jump back up and continue campaigning is what makes him Christ-like.
No, but one thing I do know, and this was one of my first reactions, when it happened so fast, I turned on the TV, the incident was over, you could see that President Trump was okay, we didn't know about the deceased person at the time. But my first thought was, President Trump knew exactly the risks he was taking, running for re-election. He knew he'd be vilified, he probably didn't understand the full extent of lawfare, he realized his life would be at risk. But he did it anyway, and you know why, Jake? Because President Trump loves this country. And that's the other thing I would say about his supporters, those rally goers. That's, if there's one attribute the Trump supporters.
Yeah, it's for Donald Trump so loved the United States that he was willing to give his own life, right? Like it's that kind of thing. That was Senator Ron Johnson reiterating the narrative, like reaffirming it, it's really trying to play up now the mythos of Donald Trump. Even though we know he is incredibly selfish with his children, selfish with his wife, selfish with his businesses. They are now painting Donald Trump as self-sacrificial and benevolent. The idea that evangelical Christians, Christian nationalists are a persecuted minority and that they are entitled to have dominion over the legal and governmental institutions over the United States, that undergirds the philosophy. And they have said that they will do whatever it takes to restore their power because that is their rightful place in this country. Graham Allen, the man who made the scary TikTok, referred to Donald Trump as the warrior president. And that also aligns with other conversations that we've been having recently. Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, he was on Steve Bannon's podcast, even though Steve Bannon is now in prison. Steve Bannon is in the pokey right now. Steve Bannon is currently incarcerated. So he has people filling in for him on his podcast called the war room. And Kevin Roberts, head of the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is responsible for the production of Project 2025. He said this, and so I come full circle on this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it. Which will remain bloodless if the left allows it. Cool. We are going to see this image everywhere, in part because I have to be honest with y'all. I don't want Donald Trump to win, but that is an iconic image. It is. Immediately when I saw it, because you know I'm not on Twitter, immediately when I saw it, I said, oh, that man's going to win a Pulitzer. Whoever took that image, and I assumed it's a man because I'm sexist, whoever took that image is going to win a Pulitzer. I immediately said that. And then I found out that Evan Vucci, the photographer, has already won a Pulitzer. He knew exactly what to do there. Christians love a dramatic-ass image, expect to see that photograph everywhere. They already got the t-shirts going. We got the never surrender. Think of all of the art in the history of Christianity that represents Christ on the cross, or Christ carrying the cross, or the Pietà, which is Mary, the mother of Jesus, holding the lifeless body of Christ. I am in awe of how things aligned for Donald Trump. We have Donald Trump using that as an opportunity to telegraph, radiate strength, courage, resilience, which he's none of those things. We have Donald Trump being able to utilize this as a moment to rally the MAGA base, who are filled with evangelical Christian nationalists. And we're also going to see the more moderate establishment Republicans use this as an opportunity to grasp, take hold of the moral high ground. And unfortunately, there's not going to be a lot of incentive for the media boogeyman, to call them out on their disingenuousness. But we have to be really clear and honest about the fact that the Republican Party is the party of stochastic terrorism. Stochastic terrorism. Noun, the public demonization of a person or group resulting in the incitement of a violent act, which is statistically probable, but whose specifics cannot be predicted. I loved this article in The Atlantic by David Frum, published July 14th, The Gunman and the Would-Be Dictator. It is sadly incorrect to say, as so many have, that political violence has no place in American society. Assassinations, lynchings, riots, and pogroms have stained every page of American political history. That has remained true to the present day. In 2016 and even more in 2020, Trump supporters brought weapons to intimidate opponents and vote counters. Trump and his supporters envision a new place for violence as their defining political message in the 2024 election. Nobody seems to have language to say, we abhor, reject, repudiate, and punish all political violence, even as we maintain that Trump remains himself a promoter of such violence, a subverter of American institutions, and the very opposite of everything decent and patriotic in American life.
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi, who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
No question about that. But as you point out, those statements from J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, President Trump and his supporters have contributed to this violent rhetoric as well.
Well, absolutely, George. We were just looking back this morning at some of the things that former President Trump has said. He warned last March of potential death and destruction if he were charged by the Manhattan District Attorney. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Trump in January warned of bedlam in the country if the criminal charges against him succeeded. And of course, in March, he said, now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That will be the least of it. He said he was partly joking and that was taken out of context. But those are indeed his words. And you have heard it from supporters as well. And supporters.
He was just joking. He was just joking. It's a joke to say, if I don't win, it's going to be a bloodbath after you tried to steal an election. So I totally expect that Donald Trump will be as indecent and sociopathic as ever. I do think that he will do a better job at hiding it, and people will be reticent to point out the extreme hypocrisy of any calls for unity or toning down of the rhetoric. I saw a headline today from the British online magazine, The Spectator, titled, "Today We're All MAGA." Excuse you? Excuse you? No. But I did think that this was interesting. I saw this today. It's on the Washington Examiner, which is a right-wing publication. Trump rewrites Republican convention speech to focus on unity, not Biden. The first sentence is world exclusive. Former President Donald Trump has completely rewritten his convention speech in light of the assassination attempt against him on Saturday and will call on Thursday for a new effort at national unity. I am interested to see where this goes. So he's indicated that he's going to change his tone. Is this going to be his Saul on the road to Damascus moment? That's for the real Bible thumpers. Hey, who here was at Vacation Bible School? Me. Where Saul is writing, he's on the road to Damascus. He gets knocked off of the donkey, loses his vision, comes back, and sees the light and changes his name and decides to become a disciple of Christ. Like, is that going to be it for Donald Trump? I wonder. I'm not sure. I'm just not convinced that he has the discipline to carry that through. I will be very impressed if he is able to keep that up. I watched the Sunday shows, or at least I did this weekend, and we saw so many establishment or moderate Republicans who understand that it is their responsibility to try to legitimize, whitewash the history of Trump and Trumpism, much the same way that Marine Le Pen did with the national rally of the far right in France. Marine Le Pen said, oh, we are getting a really bad reputation, so we need to go mainstream. We need to become more respectable. There is clearly an effort to make Trumpism more respectable, not just from the Republicans who are already respectable, but from Trump himself. I think we even saw that in the debate. People said that they were really surprised that while Joe Biden was doing what he was doing, Donald Trump did not attack. That he kept his composure, even though, he couldn't stop himself from just a lying. He couldn't stop himself from lying up and down. That he just seemed much more in control of himself than he was in 2016 or 2020. We also see that in the platform for the Republicans at the Republican National Committee. The stances on abortion are much more neutral, much less aggressive. I mean, look, Roe was already struck down. So what do you need? And actually, a lot of the hardcore right-wing evangelical Republicans were upset because the Republican National Convention, the platform, was like, hey, it's up to states. When before the official party line was life begins at conception. We don't believe in abortion. And Trump said, no, we're not doing that anymore because we need to get the college-educated white women. Another part of the attempts to rebrand are the establishment Republicans, the more respected Republicans, attempting to align Trump with historical, venerated presidents who were either shot or assassinated. We can go back to 1981 when Ronald Reagan was shot and literally almost died. We can go back to 1912 when Theodore Roosevelt, one of my favorite presidents, shout out to Theodore Roosevelt, when he was shot, but he didn't die. But also that was kind of a shaky time for Theodore Roosevelt was shot and really famously just like shook it off and, said that it was nothing. And then, of course, there's 1865 when Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed. The other thing about this assassination attempt is it creates opportunity for Donald J. Trump to be said unironically in the same sentence, to be placed unironically in the same sentence as Theodore Roosevelt or Ronald Reagan. Now, I don't venerate Ronald Reagan, but the conservatives love him. Now that's conservative Jesus. I saw Lindsey Graham on one of those shows, I think maybe it was Meet the Press, with crocodile tears in his eyes talking about how much he knows Donald Trump loves this country and how much he's been willing to sacrifice. It was absolutely horrific. So while there are a cohort of Republicans who want to telegraph to the moderates who hate all of the ideological nastiness and the really sexist, misogynistic stuff that Trump is known for, they're trying to become more respectable, and they're doing that performance. On the other side, there are a group of the Christian nationalist Republicans, the Tea Party Republicans, who do not feel incentivized to moderate their speech in any way. We're talking like the Marjorie Taylor Greenes. And while they are still going to go as hard as they ever have, the Democrats are going to self-censor. The Democrats are going to feel compelled to become much more moderate in their message, while the hardcore Tea Partiers and the Christian nationalists like the Josh Hawley feel like they're unrestrained now. The gloves are off. And that creates more deeply unequal, deeply disturbing dynamics. Because I just don't know if Democrats are going to be able to effectively fight back rhetorically. I just don't know. I'm not sure. What we really should be afraid of, what we should be really concerned about, is a landscape in which the media goes hard on Biden and soft on Trump. That's a disaster for a Biden campaign that is already very weak. And I don't know how much longer these kinds of dynamics are going to exist. Is it going to be a couple of weeks? Is it going to be a month? Is it going to be 2 months? But however long we have a landscape that goes hard on Biden and soft on Trump, is bad. Right now, the Biden campaign has paused all outbound communication. That's communication with supporters and also fundraising appeals. They have also paused all attack ads in the swing states. And that's understandable. That seems like the moral and presidential thing to do. But that means that now we are in an environment where we have the Republican National Convention going on right now in Milwaukee. It's being telegraphed to millions of people. That's tens of millions of dollars in earned media, meaning media that you don't have to pay for, in addition to all of the coverage of Donald Trump and the shooter. And how is the Republican Party going to respond while there are $0 being spent from the Biden campaign? Pushing back. The free media part of this situation is really critical because there's long been an understanding that voters who lean towards Trump are low information voters. They're less engaged with politics. They don't really keep up with the news cycle. The only time they're really tapped in is for major media events, like, say, a debate or wall-to-wall coverage of the president, former president, almost being killed, or the Republican National Convention. But the rest of the time, they're checked out. They only become tapped in very specific moments, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and it has to be something big. A major media event has to reach them. There was a Washington Post story that ran over the weekend, and was it a full story? It was like a little tiny write-up, maybe 4 or 5 paragraphs, about a woman who said she hadn't voted in a couple of decades. But after seeing the footage of Donald Trump almost being killed, that she felt like she had to support him. That she is completely disengaged from the political process. She doesn't care about politics. She's not ideological. Hasn't been for over 2 decades. But it was that media moment, that story, that prompted her to say, oh, that's my president. The concern, and of course that's one story, okay? Like, we don't know if that is going to be representative of any significant number of people. But if that is one story that can be replicated, 40 or 50,000 more times, that's game. All the Trump campaign has to do is stay disciplined. So since then, the Biden campaign, and Joe Biden, because he is the president, has had a couple of opportunities to make public statements. And shortly after Donald Trump was escorted off the stage and hurried into the SUV and taken away, I saw some things about, where is Biden? That's so stupid. That's just please. He's not on call all the time. Or is he? Oh, he is on call all the time? Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. Joe Biden was at his beach house in Delaware, and they had to set up an impromptu little television studio, their police station. Clearly, he hadn't had any opportunity to prepare. And I thought, okay, well, this is another one of those. This is an opportunity. This is a moment that Joe Biden could show the world that in a moment of quote unquote crisis, that you have things under control. How did Biden do? Fine. It was fine. It was fine. I would have preferred something a little more thoughtful and literary than "this is sick" or "this is inappropriate." I would have loved that. But he gave us what he could give when he was in Delaware, and then he gave another address to the nation from the Oval Office. Those moments demonstrate why it is so important to have a president/presidential candidate who is a very strong communicator. Because I'm extremely ideological. I am a super consumer of news and media. I am not the norm. When we're all talking about the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, people don't even read. People do not read the news. It's like me and 20,000 other people reading the news every day. Millions and millions of people watch the president on TV. That has always been my concern. Moving forward, cutting through what will be a wall of Trump/Republican messaging is going to be really hard. And it would be hard for even the best communicator. I just literally, right before I logged on, saw some clips for an interview that Biden did. Of course, there was the Lester Holt interview, and then he did another one with Speedy from Complex. I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't even think we need to even have a conversation about a replacement for Joe Biden, if I'm being honest. I think this situation has killed that. Let's move on. In addition to the messaging and communication challenges, we're also facing a huge enthusiasm gap. So this is from YouGov. Enthusiasm gaps track how excited people are to vote for their particular candidate. I've seen some people say that the enthusiasm gap can be correlated to the likelihood of one party's or the other party's voters to actually show up. Are people actually gonna go to the polls or actually send in their ballots? That's something. But the enthusiasm gap is also about general tone and feel of the party in that YouGov, in that data from July 7th through 9th. It's an Economist YouGov poll. We all know polls are a snapshot in time. We know. The Biden believers who have been coming for my neck, they say, oh, polling is flawed. Polling is flawed. Polling could totally be flawed. But we do have to think about what we're saying when we're saying that the polls, which have been incredibly stable over the last 10 months, are fundamentally flawed. Are we saying that they are flawed in a particular direction? Meaning, are they flawed to overall bias Democrats or Republicans? That doesn't quite make sense because, again, Democrat senators and Democratic House members are way outpolling Joe Biden. So somebody like a Tammy Baldwin is doing much better in her state against her Republican opponent than Joe Biden is doing against Donald Trump. So if we're saying that they're directionally flawed, that's also a problem for Democrats. You also don't really want to believe that either. Down ballot is doing much better than the person at the top. And usually down ballot is expected to ride the coattails of the presidential candidate. Another potential bright spot for those of us who love democracy and freedom and civil rights and social services and federal agencies is the Trump voters. As I mentioned before, they're a part of cohorts that don't really vote like that. Biden is privileged in the fact that he has the college educateds and he has the olds, and the college educateds and the olds do actually vote, and the women do actually vote. The men, the non-college, and the young who are more likely to, well, you know, there's the gender gap, but the young men and the non-college people, they show enthusiasm, but do they show up to the polls? Well, history says that they do show up to the polls for Donald Trump. That's the other thing. Right? The fear, and I think that this is a well-rounded fear, is that those disengaged, low-information voters will be motivated by the assassination attempt as a rallying point. That is a ubiquitous mass media story. And if we go back to 2020, where yes, Joe Biden did win, but Joe Biden pulled out that election because of less than 50,000 votes across a handful of states. The 2020 presidential election had the highest voter turnout in American history. It was right under 67%. And it still came down to 50,000 votes. And that was when Joe Biden was popular. Do y'all see why I feel how I feel? Joe Biden now has a higher unfavorability rating than Donald Trump. 80-something% of registered voters say Joe Biden is too old to be president. So yes, we should continue to talk about Project 2025. Of course you should. Of course you should do that. And broadly, when people learn about Project 2025, they don't like it. But what do you do about the 60-something% of Democratic-leaning voters, according to the ABC News Washington Post Ipsos poll? The 60-something% of Democratic-leaning voters who say that the Democratic Party needs a different candidate. What do you do about that? Help me, Alan Lichtman. Okay, help me see it. Help me see it, please. As I mentioned before, we're at a point where all of the back and forth and the arguing about Biden, I think it's over. I think Joe Biden always intended to run out the clock, but I think he is going to successfully run out the clock, and he is going to be the nominee, and he is going to keep running the kind of campaign that he's been running, which is a losing one. I don't know what else to say. It's losing. At any rate, where do we go from here? I like that Biden is making himself more available. I like that he is doing more rallies. I like that in Detroit, he outlined a plan for the first 100 days of a second Biden administration. I do wonder what the big money donors are thinking, because they have turned off the faucets. And no matter what Joe Biden says, he does care about the elites. He loves the elites. He deeply wants to be accepted and embraced by the elites, but also the elites write checks that every campaign needs to sustain itself. We can talk about all of the Democratic Party infrastructure. They have great infrastructure state-wise, but the infrastructure doesn't work if you run out of money because the rich people aren't giving, and you are not going to be able to match that with small dollar donations. Sorry. As we wrap this up, I will just, say to y'all that one thing I definitely would not do, especially not using my legal name with my real face, is joke about assassinating a former president, the presidential frontrunner, on a public platform. I definitely would not do that. I definitely would not joke about assassinating the former president and current presidential frontrunner when he has explicitly stated that he desires to use the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies. I definitely would not do that. I'm not sure what's going on with y'all. Frontal lobes, I understand, are not fully developed. What are y'all doing? What is going on? Anyways, that is all I have to say about that. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will see you next time. Bye.